Welcome to Evolved Sun. This is your host, Matt Finch, and I'm really excited to bring this new episode to you, which is on the secondary missions of all starseeds and wanderers. The video I uploaded just before this one was on the main mission of wanderers and starseeds, and it was on lightening the self equals lightening the planet, transformation of self equals transformation of planet. And it was all about the ministry of being, or the ministry of essence, and being most authentically yourself. Today I'm going to be using as a resource the same book, A Wanderer's Handbook by Carla Ruckert, and this is the first part of the secondary missions, Outer Gifts. The reason I'm going to break this up into a part 1 and a part 2 for the secondary missions, for the outer gifts, is because the secondary missions is a lot longer of a topic to cover than the main mission. On this first part today, you're going to be learning about the outer gifts, the doing of being a passive radiator of love and light, seeing people at the soul level, being there for others, listening, and communication. And the part 2 will be another video on the secondary missions, outer gifts. Picking up where we left off after communication, we will go into teaching as an outer gift, healing, doing global work, channeling, and vocal channeling. And with that being said, let's get right into the secondary missions of all starseeds and wanderers. The secondary missions, outer gifts. The doing of being. We all come into life with a partially preformed personality and various talents with which we have chosen to be endowed during this incarnation. As we grow and learn, we find ourselves developing some gifts and forsaking others. It is part of discovering who we are to recognize our own gifts and to choose the ones we wish to develop. From the near infinity of possible outer gifts, I have chosen a variety of the ones people ask me about the most, and the ones I myself feel are worthy of thought. In discussing ways of using our gifts, I do not mean to make those who may not have such gifts feel they should learn them, or feel guilty or lesser because they do not happen to be skilled at a particular gift. I simply want to consider outer service to others by looking through these various lenses at it. Joe Kem writes, "We are all making drastic modifications in our lives. We are all reconnecting to the source. And as we all endeavor to reconnect, rest assured all of our paths will go in different directions, but all knowing the destination will be one and the same. When looking at how we might serve by sharing our gifts, it helps to remember that we are all on the same path, that our connections to each other transcend linear processes, and that our destination is utterly shared. As creatures of ineffable love, as part of one infinite being within the Creator of all that there is, we enjoy a communion in which, by our very being, we make far more of a difference than we ever can by virtue of our most marvelous work in the outer world. This is helpful to realize, for the main distraction to thinking about sharing our gifts is the feeling that we must be doing something dramatic in order to serve. This is emphatically not true, in my opinion. We cannot help serving by our very being, either for the forces of love or for the opposite, depending on the direction of our seeking. Any outer service we are able to add to the inner and primary service of being is icing on the cake. And any activity, whatever, in which we attempt to serve another is equal to all other attempts to serve of equal purity of intention. A wanderer in her early 40s and fresh from a life-changing UFO experience was writing to me about her concern for serving others. It is extremely common for wanderers to have an urgency about being of service. I wrote to tell her my feelings that whatever we did with love was a service to others, and she responded, "When you told me that doing the dishes and changing diapers is still a form of service, and that manifestation is only secondary, my whole viewpoint changed, and I can feel joy within. All it takes is love. I just need to love myself more." Those of Quo echo this thought. For it is not what service you do, it is the love with which you do this service that makes all services equal. It is not the healing or the feeding or the changing or the washing. It is the quality of love with which you do it. This quality of love is something scientists do not yet know how to measure. However, each of us knows people whose nature is such that they radiate love and peace to those around them in a wonderful way. So we each have our subjective ways of knowing what the Quo are talking about. The work of learning how better to serve by doing and being is subtle and subjective, not only now, but for incarnations to come. Learning truly well how to serve the Creator and our other selves is not something we will polish off in one incarnation. It is something we can set our minds to studying for the long run. You have moved into an area that will be continued in your development for many, many incarnations and through at least one more density. This situation of loving, serving, and trying to become the forgiving universal self, and therefore the forgiven universal self, is a sacred and a monumental task. Note the centrality of forgiveness in this statement. Again and again, we find the echoes of praise for this universally heart-opening quality. Forgiveness seems to be a part of many outer gifts. But what are the outer gifts that we consider most spiritually helpful? People generally list teaching, healing, statesmanship, and channeling first when they are thinking of dramatic ministries, and we will talk about each of these. But almost any vocation can be a service to others. Wanderers have been suggested to have clusters of talent in the arts, and we have all been inspired by works of art, from songs and paintings to plays and movies, and all the rest. I feel that it is probable, however, that wanderers are no more liable to have artistic talent than any Earth native. The Quo suggests that the one asset the wanderer has in discovering her gifts is a more clearly apparent sense of faith. The difference between wanderers and third density graduation hopefuls is within the area of faith and intuition. The wanderer has more of an instinctive belief or faith in spiritual coincidence and the aliveness of all things. This is a rather small advantage, and one that ET wanderers can use only if they trust in their intuition. In either case, it will take practice. Those of Ra say, as with any entities, each wanderer has its unique abilities, biases, and specialities, so that from each portion of each density represented among the wanderers comes an array of pre-incarnative talents, which then may be expressed upon this plane which you now experience, so that each wanderer, in offering itself before incarnation, has some special service to offer in addition to the doubling effect of planetary love and light and the basic function of serving as beacon or shepherd. Thus there are those of fifth density whose abilities to express wisdom are great. There are fourth and sixth density wanderers whose abilities to serve as, shall we say, passive radiators or broadcasters of love and light are immense. There are many others whose talents brought into this density are quite varied. Our concern, then, is to identify, develop, and share what gifts we may have. When the soul awakens to its spiritual identity, concomitant with the gladness of knowing who one is, comes the honor and responsibility involved in the feeling that there is work to do, and for each entity that work has been prepared in the sense that each seeker has gifts and talents for which there is a use. We encourage each to flow with those talents, to support the self in using those gifts that have been brought into incarnation, that have been carefully chosen by each for the outer service, for the actions and accomplishment that each may choose to offer. Being a passive radiator of love and light. 292 is a wanderer with Pleiadian memories who considers himself a researcher into both scientific and metaphysical truth, and he says, what is really important, the most valuable gift, the greatest accomplishment, the biggest challenge, the grandest joy, is to live the truth of one's being, which is of the Creator. It is a true service to be. Perhaps that is all one can really do. I do feel it is true that the being must inform the doing, or the doing is empty. In the outer gift of offering the self as a passive radiator of love, the being, done consciously, is the doing, the entire gift. We can, if we wish, take the main mission, which is to be most profoundly ourselves and to come into unity with the heart of love within us, and choose to pursue it consciously every day, all the time. This conscious pursuit of the doing of the being is, I think, the very purest outer sharing of the inner gift of desire to serve, which was our greatest gift of all in terms of service to others, for we need to desire to serve before the opportunities we must hope for will come. Those of El Lima say, "The greatest work that any can do at this time to maximize the potential for critical mass being achieved by harvest is in their personal dedication to the life of a contemplative who is also connected vitally with the environment with which he lives. That is, have been given to the seeker, it is then its responsibility to manifest those gifts in actions, in thoughts, and in intentions, not necessarily by dramatic efforts such as becoming a pilgrim upon a dusty path. For there are many, many entities whose lives have touched hundreds or thousands of people by the simple beauty of their presence. There are those who have chosen to be mothers and fathers of very needful souls, and who have generated more positivity and light for the planetary consciousness by this activity, humble though it may seem, as the mother and father doing the dishes, than the entrepreneur who goes upon the road feeling that it has found the answer. The being of doing needs to begin with being. When we feel love flowing through our hearts, we are ready to respond to the call for service. Those of Latwii talk about being a passive radiator as being on a kind of watchtower. Some of you have chosen not only to experience within the incarnation to learn to grow and to serve, but also to maintain the high places within the consciousness, the watchtowers of love, which beam forth as light sources to the planet upon which you now enjoy incarnation, to the entities upon it, to the earth itself, and to those energetic vibratory levels within the earth's atmosphere which are in dire need of that great watch faithfully held. Those of you to whom these words express a recognizable duty and honor may know that whether you seem to be a businessman, a homemaker, a queen, or a shepherd, there is that inner citadel at the top of which is a watchtower, and the only lamp that is lit is the lamp lit by the deepest heart as it gazes in worship and adoration from light into light, knowing light, accepting light, blessing light, and allowing the crystal of the heart of hearts to turn the self into the metaphysical lamp upon the hillside, the city upon the hill, not for the notice or understanding or thanks of mankind, but for the doing of it alone, for the keeping of the watch. In many cases, the keeping of a faithful watch is the primary mission or task set for the self before the incarnation. There are many wanderers who have come to a confused and baffling plane and are saturated in the intricacies of incarnation, yet who still, again and again, in thought stray to the watchtower. If it calls you, go, not only in meditation. Allow the watchtower to call you again and again, for moments, for minutes, hours, for the incarnation, until your desire to serve as conduit for light and love on the totally unspoken vibratory planes is satisfied. Until your desire to serve as conduit for light and love on the totally unspoken vibratory planes is satisfied. The process of knowing the self more deeply has been compared to being born again. I think the reference is not to any specifically Christian act or process, but rather to the awakening of the spiritual self within. Nothing can be known, but you have all inside. Each of you has all inside. And as one approaches the self more gently, more quietly, and more aware of the true nature of the self, one is able to see that one is indeed born again, as so many of your peoples have been distressed. To hear the phrase, born within a... As so many of your peoples have been distressed to hear the phrase, born within as a self-aware, eternal light being to aid the earth that you so love, to aid the changes that must come. It is simply necessary to find who you are and then be who you are in the very most truthful way, the most honest way that you can. All else will follow. The ability to rest in the present moment is not a gift given to us all by nature. However, we can all work on it. We all have the capacity within us to some extent. The people who will find this outer service most appealing will be of two kinds. One kind is that person whose schedule is completely out of time, because this service can be done anywhere, doing anything else, as long as part of the doing is working on the being that's doing the doing. The mantra for this service option is do be, do be, do. The other person wise to take up this service is the mystical person who enjoys plunging into the unknown and mystery-filled present moment. Each of you is aware that science describes this universe, this room in which you sit, to be specific as a great emptiness within which, just as the night sky sparkles with stars near and far, the atoms and molecules of your bodies, of that upon which you sit, that of the air and of the floor, look back at you winking in the cosmic flow of energy. Each of you is galaxy upon galaxy, creation upon creation. There is in fact nothing but illusion, and who you are is, in the end, that consciousness, that light being, that is and was and shall evermore be, whether it is activated or has chosen to come once again into an awareness with the unpotentiated Creator. You are you. You are also all that you see and the Creator itself. Within this illusion, however, each of you has made the vital choice that is the purpose of this entire density of learning. That choice being how to relate to the one infinite Creator. Shall you love the Creator by serving others? Or shall you love the Creator by keeping others at a safe distance while you make yourself more powerful, and thus more able to control your environment? For the passive radiator, the choice is to release all power over the moment except to love it and all within it. Of ourselves, we cannot do this, and help is needed to move into our balanced and opened hearts. This help, this love energy, is coming through all the time, but we need a bit of grace to become able to be aware of the energy and the joy and elan that it brings. We are so busy living our lives, it is very hard to remember that all of it is an illusion, and that we are moving illusions around within other illusions in our daily lives, rather than accomplishing anything in the metaphysical sense. However, an abundance of grace and help awaits our most slender plea and request for it. Ask, and we shall be answered. Let that light within be. Let the self open and flow consciously, so that you may be part of the good in the lives of those whom you touch. Sometimes it is nothing more than a supportive smile to a stranger that makes the difference for that stranger, that particular moment. As you are given grace to lift away from the stains of sorrow and toil into the ethereal beauty of that ever-flowing love, which is the Creator, remember to be generous, and know that which comes through you is in utter abundance, completely unlimited in supply. Edom. One terse hint on accessing that grace comes from those of Quo. We suggest simply that praise and thanksgiving move the mind and heart out of things into the absolute of all that there is. What to give praise and thanksgiving for? If things are good, for our blessings. If things are tough, for our catalysts and challenges. In all weathers, we can give thanks for our relationships, our many possessions and the comfort of them, our pets and friends and family, and those for whom we are praying for healing. And we can give thanks for the endless beauties of nature, which those of Yom feel is especially helpful. Firstly, the creation of the Father, as this instrument calls the second density sphere and biota upon which you enjoy incarnation, is full and replete in undistorted love. Therefore, the earth and its creatures are helpful, whether or not the individual entity is aware of this aid. Secondly, to one whose spirit rejoices in the creation and the energies of this harmonious and beautiful creation, these positive effects are many times magnified. We may note in this regard that the impulse to seek nature can be somewhat wayward when one finds oneself in a position athwart the forces of this natural, harmonious, and sometimes inconvenient world of nature. Therefore, it is well consciously to pause in good weather and evil days alike, sun and rain, to give praise to the Infinite One for this perfected manifestation, and to offer thanks for beholding its face. Those of Quo sum up this subsection of outer gifts with this remark about being a passive radiator to the planet at large. A destiny awaits you. Your choice of how to fulfill it is always your own, and upon that fathomless, directionless sea of consciousness there remains much confusion. Yet the love within others shines to light your way, and the light which moves through you from the Infinite One is a lighthouse to others. Your being, your essential self, is your main service to the one Creator and to all of those upon your planet. Seeing people at the soul level. The outer service of seeing people as souls is one step removed from the conscious practice of being, in the sense of passive radiation, for it involves working with your relationships, with the people we are meeting day by day. There seems to be a wide variety in people. One fellow seems smart and another stupid. One woman seems quick of wit and another slow. Some of us are powerfully attractive, some of us are homely, and most of us are in between. If appearances are to be believed, we humans vary widely. The heart of the gift of seeing people as souls is lifting above these details and entering into an appreciation of all persons, which has nothing to do with their details of age, gender, race, religion, and status. Those of Quo say, when your beingness touches in with the tabernacle of the Most High and a portion of your consciousness remains in that holy place, then all places are holy, all entities are of the Christ consciousness, and the eyes with which you look at those entities are eyes infinite in their ability to channel the one original thought of the infinite Creator's love. Perhaps this gift in us lies waiting to be given permission to be encouraged, for I think spiritual seekers are, by our very nature and tendency, far more able to see themselves at the soul level than those who do not think on such things. My experience with us outsiders on the spiritual path is that we tend to be quite aware of the illusory quality of the outer world and the higher level of reality in the metaphysical inner world. As we become able to tap into more and more remembrance of the love which forms our most basic self and gives it life, we will become more aware of our own soul quality, and therefore more able to see it in those we meet. I do feel we can expect to form opinions about the people we meet on the outer level. We will take to some people more than others, but in our dealings with them, it is a strong blessing to treat all beings as if they were our most beloved children, or Christ himself, as was Mother Teresa's secret. She said that she would look into the fly-blown faces, the sores and smells and dirty bodies of the ill and dying, and by grace she would see Jesus Christ's face, and so all her healing was a ministry of the most devoted love. I feel that this woman must have gone through years of becoming able to love and accept herself at the soul level in order to develop such an outstanding practice in the outer sense. How can we see others as souls, creatures of divine love, if we are judging ourselves, as those of Quo say, only insofar as you love, accept, and refuse to judge yourself can you be compassionate in such wise to others, and only in compassion, as you see that treasure within you and within all, can you truly serve in a love that is without condition and that demands no return. This caution is a subtle one. The main sense of it is simple enough. If we are seeking someone as a soul, and that person has no appreciation of this service, this needs to be completely acceptable to us. In any service to others that is intended as polarizing towards the positive path, the gift needs to be given without stint, and any conditionality we have, however unwittingly, in our giving will come back to us in echoes that we will have to work out in the catalyst of everyday life. But further, we need not to need to help in order to be of help. We need to be able to let go of the pain we see and let it be all right that this person is in pain. Loving someone as a soul does not mean we can interrupt her processes or solve her problems, or that we should even hope to. Rather, it means that we are able to lift her in our hearts and minds beyond the confines of all limitations, including those problems. Mike Karinko shares, "There was someone that I am good friends with that was going through a really rough time. I was feeling frustrated and inadequate. I wanted to help her, but didn't know how to go about doing it. Mira suggested that this was actually a distortion of non-acceptance of others' free will to experience those things that I perceived to be painful. She said that if I were to respect this free will, then I would not feel the need to help. Once this was done, my energy centers would be cleared and the energy would flow more freely. This would help me to be more open with myself. and put me into a better position to be catalyst if that was what I was there for. In this practice of seeing what is unseen and knowing the infinity of seemingly finite persons, there are shadows aplenty and many, many seeming failures. But those who gravitate to this service will tend to be easy on themselves to the extent that they realize that of themselves they could not offer this service of soul sight. The secret to this offering is the surrender of the small self and all other selves into the Creator that unifies us. Those of Quo say, to be the most efficient polarity in the positive sense, one must be willing and able to give freely enough to the self that one is not concerned whether there be a return for what is given. In this service, the one so serving trusts in that which is greater than the self to sustain this small self in its daily round of activities, that it might be nourished and supported in a fashion that will allow its service to continue. As we practice soul vision, we help our own quality of life, for one who sees from this level is a peaceful person indeed, seeing goodness within all selves, no matter what the outer appearance. Mary Upson says, we are each at our own level of awareness, tolerance, ability to accept and forgive. Compassion is important, and seeing each other's innocence regardless of our reaction. If we could each see the other's innocence in all matters, wouldn't this be a beautiful world? Marty was writing this missive not just to me, but to a whole Wanderers email group that was wrangling about some matter at the time. A month later, some elements of the group must still have been feuding, for she wrote, perhaps we are here to see all through the eyes of love. If we were able to be at the place where we could bestow love on everything we see, even if only in our thoughts, would our perception of it change? Would it change? I believe so. Seeing others or ourselves with eyes of love, we are the Creator looking at the Creator. One aspect of this practice which is unexpected is the response factor. When we work to release condition in our relationships with other people, there is some mechanism that sets into motion one blessing after another for us. Love can begin to come at us in waves, and it can be overwhelming. Let it wash through, the good opinion and the bad. Let it come and go without holding on to either. Do not resist the evil we see. Let it be, let it go. At the same time, do not resist the good. Let people say good things to you. Accept love offerings when they are sincerely felt and given. It is part of seeing at the soul level for this lesson to arise. The Quo say, receiving the love offerings of others is the greatest gift you can give and is won by giving in service to others. When you reach the point at which there is no difference between receiving and giving, absolute and unreserved love, then shall you be ready to learn the ways of wisdom. Until then, you must learn these lessons that seem so opposite: how to serve others, how to accept service from others. Yet, are you not looking in a mirror when you gaze upon another? Is that entity not looking at the Creator when he gazes back at you? Is this not the essence of your being? It has been my experience that this side lesson of learning to accept love comes in cycles. If the wave of being loved gets too intense, hold on. Soon it will be balanced by catalysts from those who do not appreciate us. There was a time when I really could not take a compliment, being too much of a perfectionist and too aware of my shortcomings. I still have to work on it, but I get better. I am working on my response to not being appreciated too. But I know that lesson far better. Forgiving without expectation of return seems an incarnational lesson of mine. I have talked to many wanderers who have identified this as one of their lessons in the school of life also. This makes sense to me. We wanderers came here to learn and to serve. The point of revisiting third density in the learning sense is to re-examine and remake our choice of polarity with more purity and power. Nothing sharpens polarity better than adversity. When someone is rude to us, we have the immediate choice. Shall we see this person as an angry person assaulting us, or as a companion soul in pain? The Hatan say, when you gaze upon the rude address of negativity, think of the sick child and reach out your hand in compassion, and take cool water, and comfort that negativity with compassion and great feeling of brotherhood. You are that negativity just as you are positive, and to heal negativity is to take it into the open heart and love it. all that is not love will fall away. One venue native to this service is the inner watchtower within the heart, whether visited in contemplation, meditation, or prayer. When we see the suffering of humankind, we behold a mighty and unfathomable sorrow. When we see one angry person, we see that same sorrow projecting like a fountain from the general sea of woe. As we witness suffering, let us join those in the inner temple of prayer. As those of Quo say, there are among you those who do a great deal of work within, calling in prayer or meditation, or worrying or concern, sending love and healing to those who watch and suffer and wait and perish. There's a lovely orison sounding, with millions of souls blending at all times. Your planet prays without ceasing. Always in every night watch there are those millions unknown to you who keep the watch for humankind. When others sleep, you may well be raising your internal voice in praise of the Infinite One, in thanksgiving and in intercession for all who suffer. And so, by lives lived, in some part sacrificially, the societal karma is being, to some extent, alleviated through the heartfelt caring of very many of your peoples. Seeing people at the soul level is a way of caring about others that is non-invasive and impersonal. It has a refined and philosophical aura to it, and remains within the self. Yet its use positively affects ourselves, those about us, and the planet itself. There is much to recommend this gift for development. Being there for others. My great-aunt Lisbeth is my all-time favorite relative. Being a typical wanderer, I was a totally unsuitable and unlikely child and teenager. I continue this tradition as an adult, and just about every relative I have has disagreed strongly with my thinking and decisions at one point or another. But not my Aunt Lisbeth. Whatever I was thinking, she found it interesting, provocative, and a trigger for her own thoughts, and the numerous literary quotations and artistic references she always had coming to mind. Whatever I decided to do, she found that very solution to be the inspired choice. She probably traded letters twice a month from my 8th year until shortly before her death, when she became unable to write and I was in my 40s. And in all that time, her flow of encouragement and support was continuous. Aunt Lisbeth, for whom I am named, lived in Bryn Mawr, and no one in the family was located anywhere close to her. So her last years were spent completely alone, bent as a gnome, living in a convalescent center in constant pain. At her funeral, several people who lived and worked at the home rose to share their admiration of her, for she had been, even in old age's growing unawareness of where and when, the same sweet and trusting soul who saw the good in everyone, and woke each day with a smile and an enthusiasm for living that was bone deep. Lisbeth was there for me. This asset was one of my treasures as a child, and the memory of it warms me still. Would that I could ever love life and persons with her degree of success. As a natural critic, I would ruefully say I am better at telling the truth as I know it than being of such blind and universal support. But I am convinced that the practice is profoundly blessed and powerful to serve. It is of the same basic nature as seeing people as souls. But rather than being impersonal and nonspecific, this practice works with people's worldly sorrows and dreams, hopes and fears and choices, looking for ways to encourage and support others. In offering it, we are still seeing the self and other self as creator, but we are more aware of our ability to speak and reach out in specific ways. The Creator's love can only be expressed, that support can only be given by the hands that are of flesh. You are the Creator to those about you. Your support is the only way the Creator can support within the incarnation, within the illusion. Your hands, your voice, your smile, your eyes, these things are your gifts to your brothers and sisters. Gypsy brings it right down to earth. I know just being who I am and listening to others and making them smile and laugh and not take the day-to-day stuff so seriously, that all is well. Romy Borrell shares her vision of this service. In my search for myself and my purpose, I often overlook the most basic opportunities for service, honoring and supporting my partner. Just preparing a meal with love and thoughtfulness is service. taking a few minutes to read with my son, calling my mother just to let her ramble. Often I get so overwhelmed in my seeking and my purpose and what I want to offer that I don't take time to be the others in my life and understand what they need from me. I especially admire Romy for calling her mother. I despise the telephone and always hope to stay off the wretched instrument. But back to her statement. Notice she said to take time to be the people in her life. Not be with them, but be them. It is a tremendously unselfish act to be there for another person, not putting forward our own opinions, except where they support and encourage the other. The key is respect for their subjective point of view. We ask each always to remember to respect what other people see, what other people believe, and what other people hold true, not attempting to correct them, but simply supporting them in whatever they do, for each has a unique path. Quo. Part of this practice is non-judgment, both in refraining from judging others and refraining from judging how well we are supporting those we hope to serve. We will never get an accurate reading by taking our own spiritual temperature. To know how well we are doing, we shall need to wait until we have ended this earthly life and find ourselves in sunnier, more clarified climes. Those of Quo observe, "We know that you desire to help, to serve, to love, and to give. Love and serve that which is nearest to you. Cherish that which is given unto you, and release with gladness that which moves from you. For you shall pass in and out of many lives, and in your interactions those things will occur which you know not of, nor shall you know until you enter a larger life in which the veil is lifted, and you are able to see clearly that which you have been able to do in service during the incarnational period that you now enjoy. In the normal course of events, we fail at being there for our other selves from time to time. At least, I do. Part of offering this gift of presence is the releasing of feelings of failure and self-judgment when we seem to fail to live up to our ideals. The Quo Council. Was this wagon that you hitched yourselves to a bit bulky? Sometimes in a desire to do so much, entities move faster than their deepest selves can walk. So, unhitch yourselves from this yoke. Let the wagon go. You have pulled it long enough, and come always together as new entities, new souls, newly dedicated as if at the very first of meetings. When there is a misunderstanding, when we are apparently of no support, let us accept the seeming disharmony with patience, releasing the need to be right or to be anything at all besides the voice and touch of the Creator, and finding the courage and strength to let such difficulties slip into the past. Then let us begin anew, re-seeing ourselves and the other self as one being within the infinite Creator's unity. Sometimes this process can seem a long one, but if we persevere, we can enter into new and more fully supportive connections, as we find the springs of deep love within our own hearts flowing through us in infinite supply, and as we accept the grace and consolation of resting in faith. Listening. Although I make no claims to be an expert listener, this outer gift is perhaps the most attractive to me of all of the ones in this chapter, and calls to me the most of any gift I may have given myself before this incarnation. Words fascinate me as much as people do. Language is slippery at best, and the way people use language is highly individual and subjective. What comes through in correspondence or talking may or may not be a linear, straightforward thing with a shallow bottom and clear meaning. Far more likely is a multi-layered piece of communication, in which some questions and issues may be expressed while others remain unspoken, and perhaps even unknown to the speaker. This is also the nature of the listening self, and each and every distortion and insecurity can baffle clear listening. How we hear people begins in a welter of our own unadmitted biases and progresses through patience, persistence, and sheer learning experience, and the ensuing humility. The greatest support to the practice of the gift of really listening is the daily practice of silence. The keeping of silence, the keeping of the listening ear as part of the daily round of activity is always, we feel, an excellent practice. For in the silence, in the listening lies the key that unlocks the door of your own wisdom. that which is within the deep mind, that whose voice is silence and which can only be heard by the open and listening heart. We do not need to tell you how difficult a practice it is to maintain the silent and listening receptivity to destiny in a world in which intangible and invisible things are often given no worth or value at all. Yet, this practice is most productive of peace of mind and is very efficient in its own way at keeping the seeker upon the path chosen before the incarnative experience. The silence is a palpable thing. We can practice silence on walks, in exercising, if we turn off the headset radios and just enjoy the ambiance in meditation and prayer, in lounging in splendid leisure on a holiday, in just sitting and daydreaming. Jim and I went through a period of several years in which we kept silence for one full day a week, at a time when we were dealing with a lot of my illness and needed to work harder on the quality of our consciousness and life together. It was a practice that we found very rewarding and healing. Its only drawback was the amount of time we spent offering each other things we thought they might like. Without words to express our desire to serve each other, we did a lot of fetching and offering and, at meals, the passing of condiments. But that was only a minor drawback. If we are attracted to the ministry of silent listening, we need to practice silence persistently. The inner self will still speak far too stridently to be considered truly silent, but over time I think the silence becomes more comfortable and native, and our quality of hearing becomes somewhat enhanced. The hardest thing to balance, for those of us with many opinions, is the desire to speak helpful thoughts. Those of Atanse, many are the well-meaning instruments who feel moved to serve and who then err on the side of doing and talking. If you are talking, you cannot listen. If you are doing, often you cannot hear. And in serving others, the function of listening is central. Entities are seldom what you expect. Things that appear simple at first glance may be found to be coming from a bias in that person whom you wish to help, to which you must listen carefully to comprehend. In listening, the goal is not to form an opinion and prepare to speak. The goal is to become a mirror, clear and lucid. We ask you to listen, not to speak, for in listening you provide a loving and compassionate mirror, which mirrors back to that other self which is the creator, that which the other self is doing, that it would not wish to do, to allow that entity to realize that which it is not doing that it does wish to do. In listening, you become a manifestation of the Christ. In listening and forgiving, you have moved ever closer to the mind of Christ. There is another aspect to listening. Sometimes, what a person wishes to communicate to us is, according to them, all about us and our shortcomings. We do not need to take in anger, rudeness, or spiritual dyspepsia, but we do need to realize that even though a person's anger may be inappropriate, we may be able to take the content of the actual criticism constructively to learn something new about ourselves and to gain from the process of examining the self. I find this is an often difficult but always rewarding exercise, and emerge from such times of self-examination refreshed and cleansed. Listening can be a Lenten pastime, but soul-searching and the willingness to humble the self are salutary growers of spiritual maturity, and bread does come back upon the waters. Often, we find listening ears when we ourselves need to be heard. It is the gift of each to each that in communication a more objective or unbiased viewpoint might be had by all. Each has gifts of this kind to give, and each has much to receive, even from those who seem to be negatively impressed and critical. Open the ears always when this occurs, for perhaps truth may lie there, and perhaps freedom might come from a new perception of this truth. For with each other's help, the incarnational self attempts more and more to confirm its vibrational pattern to that one original pattern of great selfhood. This is the object, to match the vibrational characteristics of the one infinite creator. All of self-perceived selfhood is an illusion. All of creation is an illusion. There's nothing here. There's nothing there. There is only everything, and it takes up no time nor space. Edom. The spiritually oriented listener, then, is listening in eternity, with the consciousness of the widest viewpoint, which is infinity, And yet she is also focusing on this one soul, this one thought process, this one area of concern and learning. It is a practice to delight the heart that yearns always to be better, to serve in a higher way, to become more pure, to honor the divinity in people more deeply. It is a nurturing method that is intangible, yet most keenly felt by the speaker. There is nothing like the feeling of finally being fully heard, or even heard at all. As with the exercise of all gifts, the listener becomes the learner of much. Beyond any understanding of the problems heard about, there is the process of resting more and more in the wordless clarity of silence to bring our minds and hearts to a more profound awareness of the self as a spiritual being. This is the greatest gift of silence. It gives us ourselves as it gives the speaker himself. Communication. I thought about heading this section about outer gifts, talking. However, the other half of listening as an outer gift is not precisely talking. It is talking with an open heart. Those of Quo say, whatever the interactions between any two entities, the sweetness within the stream of moment-by-moment living is dependent greatly upon the self's ability to open the heart, both to the giving and to the receiving of information, communications, and shared emotions, such as affection, love, or appreciation. It may seem, indeed, that some things never need to be said. Yet, if there is a kindly opinion, a good thought, or that which occurs in the impulse of the moment which seems fair and loving to be shared, let that be shared. For when the breath is expended in speech concerning the desire to love, to understand, to support, or to strengthen another, that energy is as the healing that moves between the worlds, between the lines, between the thoughts, conceptions and intellectualizations of the rational mind. Language, indeed, could be well dispensed with were it not for the need to communicate, for that which most deeply uncovers and cleanses the self is most often not the rational, logical, or common sense, but rather that speech or action which is intuited by that portion of the self which dreams and receives information from the subconscious. For that portion of the self which is visible is but the tip of a very large iceberg which is completely submerged beneath the surface of that water's edge which is the alignment of the deeper mind or subconscious mind. Communication, then, is not simply giving clear speech to a listener and sharing information in a way that a listener can understand. It is also responding to that which is heard, both in the words and in between the lines of what the speaker has said, with an attitude of open-hearted love and a naive faith that thoughts can be most helpfully shared. This level of communication is not easy. It is both an art and a spiritual practice. As with the development of all outer gifts, it is necessary, before setting the goal of developing the gift on the outer plane, to do the inner work that brings the self more and more into an awareness of the full self. We do not become perfected ever. Ask any saint and he will tell us. The more ethically fastidious we become and the higher our vibratory level, the more clearly we will see our many faults. But we on the path of awakening must finally capitulate and fall in love with our error-prone, biased, ornery selves. That is what it takes to begin to communicate with transparency and clarity with ourselves and others in a way that is seen as a help and the sharing of a real gift. We start talking before we open our mouths. The first thing we communicate is our basic vibratory complex. Your inherent vibratory expression communicates more deeply, more searchingly than you shall ever know, than you shall ever be aware of. For the truth, as it becomes purer, is that which we are, and that is far beyond words. Idem. When we are working upon knowing ourselves, we may feel we are being too selfish. Nonetheless, doing this work is absolutely necessary in order to communicate. Our self-confidence and gladness of heart frees both speaker and listener to feel free to share. If we are not feeling radiant, our first work, before any communication is attempted, is to balance our attitude and find the way back to our own open heart. The art of communication is enhanced substantially by this conscientious clearing up through the green ray center. The clearing of the heart and its opening is exceedingly important, and usually much of a seeker's time is continually spent in keeping this heart energy flowing and radiant. The work turns, then, from the obviously radiant to a more tightly focused radiance, and the development of communication skills which are based upon a certain depth of personality or depth of a point of view that is in the blue ray center. Edom. The chakra clearing may well extend right through the indigo ray, for communication can involve the gateway to intelligent infinity in the seeker whose depth of personhood has moved into the adept's circle. That depth of personality is hard won by most of us, and it tends to manifest as a humility, the humility of one who knows from experience that communication can fail badly. As in all aspects of the positively oriented path, pride has no place, and it is a waste of time for us to be proud of communicating well. We can be grateful for the gift and glad when we do it well, but inevitably, there will come the time when we fail utterly while doing everything as well as we can. When these failures come, embrace them and do not be swayed. Just be ready to try again. If an entity has the humility and the patience to work with another entity to achieve clear communication, nothing will keep that entity from achieving clear communication, but it is to the humble only that this becomes true. Edom. To humility I would also add patience, since when a communication is disrupted through misunderstanding, often the issues involved cannot be remedied in any short time. Sometimes there will need to be silence between two sensitive people while imbalances are adjusted within each person. Recently I was flamed in a rude 9-page email masterpiece of its ranting kind, in itself an humbling experience, by an old and good friend who has contracted divorce madness. I am presently experiencing a period of silence with my friend, whom I know to be a good and serious seeker, and in whom I trust. Right now I can love her, pray for her, and smile when I think of her fine qualities and quick wit, but I really can't share my opinions with her without further hurting her. I inadvertently hurt her feelings deeply by sharing my opinions forcefully on a matter I did not realize had become sensitized. Further, I had expressed concern which was quite misunderstood to be a criticism. When I realized how insensitive I had been, I apologized, but it was too late. She did not believe me, feeling I had been far too critical. This brought me up against my nature, which is that of a far better constructive critic and sounder of principles than blind supporter. I knew this about myself already. I could see it was my opinions which hurt this woman, not actually myself as a person, but my belief system. Belief systems will not always be useful to share. I needed to wait to be asked. That's the lesson here. Wait to be asked to share an opinion. I rest instead in the best forgiveness and silence I know how to keep, for I want to be ready to begin again with her when we start to regain the trust in each other's sincere support, respect, and courtesy that has been the foundation of our relationship as two serious seekers and friends. These things take time, for rage to cool, for feelings to mend, for life to move on. Sometimes, part of communication is sitting with stones in our mouths and keeping the forgiving silence that respects the depth of someone's pain and gives the gift of time. Another very tricky thing about communication is that it so centrally uses words. Slithery as pieces of okra, the best of them, words are a poor substitute for concept, but it is the best we humans can do within the veil, shorn of our ability to receive concept communication from mind to mind. Those who are very good communicators often have this intuitive and subconscious ability at their conscious command to a degree, and it enhances their chances of using the clumsy symbols that words are. Even the most intelligent and dedicated communicator uses words which have more or less power for the self, but not the same power for the other self. Consequently, communication on a logical, conscious level is almost bound to be often extremely difficult. Never impossible. Edom. That matches my experience of communication over decades of a wide correspondence. We can get better at it, but we never get good enough not to err in hearing or saying. It is a wonderful challenge to me to find the most positive, honest, and kind way of responding to a request for information, opinion, or counsel. I believe in the sharing of concerns as a healing practice, as those of Kuo say. If there is an experience which is difficult, in that disease or fear of any kind is brought into the conscious mind. The sharing of this concern with another is that which begins the healing process, in that the energies expressing themselves as differently have an easier movement through the being when they are freely discussed and shared with another. Thus, the entity with the difficulty is assured at the most basic of levels that it is acceptable to another and that another cares for it and is willing to share with it in the difficulty. Idem. This goes back to the self-confidence that allows one to open the heart and let the native love stream through. The truly opened heart often appears childlike because it is blindingly honest, speaking that which it thinks without judgment in an attempt to understand the self as well as other selves. In this configuration, the communication is at its most effective, given that there are those which can accept and communicate in return while hearing those blunt truths that may not be as pleasant as the euphemisms, rationalizations, and cliches that surround most timid and tentative communication. Hatan. Communication, at its best, is an intertwining and melting together of the mundane, the emotional, and the philosophical, the many levels of thing and thought, and two personalities being shared back and forth in the kind of liquid made by two minds relating. It is subjective, this melding. What entities are doing when they attempt to speak the truth to each other is relating themselves to the other through the area of concern or question. The actual truth these entities communicate is in part the truth of themselves and only in part the truth about which the words are speaking. This is how central a part personality and relationship play in the business of seeking to speak truly. Quo. Sometimes we are asked to give someone our opinion, and we know that it really matters to the asker. When we are asked, then the clarity of our communication is in being sure the heart is open and finding the most positive way to say the truth. Let our truth shine without reservation. There are times to be confrontive and surgical and blunt and honest, because the entity you wish to serve has got to know your point of view. Do not do this unless it is asked of you. But when it is asked of you, in a compassionate way, express yourself in clear communication, in brilliant Blu-ray. Hatan. It is central to clear communication that we wait to be asked before blazing forth. It is the work of some patience to come to that place where you are willing to wait until you are asked in order to attempt to be of service. This sounds very simple, but it is very difficult when you feel that you have something to say that will help another. When this feeling hits, there is the urge to share, and we do not say anything, and we do not say that this is wrong. We simply say that it may not be service to others. For what entities desire, they shall ask for, and it is when that other entity asks that the precious gift of service may then be shared. Quo. The art of listening through to the end substantially affects communication. Many people are caught by the temptation of listening just until they have heard something that catches their immediate response, then wanting to share that response. This creates a situation where one person is talking, but the other is looking for a chance to re-enter the conversation, to share that response, instead of continuing to listen. Part of developing the gift of clear communication with others is in hearing them out. I realize this can be frustrating if we have something to share, but we don't always have to say the things we have to share. It's not always the important thing to the conversation. The rest of that speech we think we already understand may take another turn entirely. We will do better to continue to listen to the end. If you become aware of a situation in which your words are not being heard, then it is that you may ask yourself whether you wish to be heard or whether you wish to allow the other self to express that which that self wishes to express and assume a role of simply listening. In many instances, the appropriate response, we would say, metaphysically speaking, is simply to abandon the desire to be heard and become a sounding board that can hear what another self is attempting to say. This yielding up of the inner agenda and the thing to say is a mark of spiritual maturity. It is an action very difficult to complete, for there is within each self a deep well of desire to be heard. to be heard by the self, and to be heard by those other selves which have meaning for the self. And yet many times the straightest and shortest distance to clear communication is to become silent, to release the desire to be heard, and to accept, temporarily, the role of purely listening. Idem. Again and again, we will find silence to be an extraordinarily graceful resource that enhances communication. And if that silence is to heal, it greatly needs the balm of forgiveness of the self, of the other self, of the blockage between, of the pain of failing. Again and again, we must flee to the heart and seek to rest in the love of the Infinite One, in working with this outer gift of speech with another. If there is a failure of direct communication, for instance, between yourself and another entity, opening the heart involves not only speaking with that person to the full extent of one's capacity to communicate, but also forgiving the other self, yourself and the situation, which arose betwixt the two which did not partake of the open heart. The blockages of each lower chakra are fairly easy to pinpoint, since as the energy is blocked, there is also a feeling tone within one, an uneasiness, which speaks as loudly as any words, and certainly far better than any rationalization of behavior or thinking. Hatan. It does help in times of challenged communication to look at the issues involved and to look within the self for what energies within the system are being baffled. The rational mind can be of good use when used as the tool of inquiry. The details of energy balance are informative and interesting. They do not, however, amount to half the weight of the intuition and spiritual forces that lie beneath, or beyond, that entire level of speaking and words. Always look to the heart for its truth. Find the truth that love's energy brings, if we can, for when looked at with eyes of love, even the most difficult truth becomes possible to communicate. The world runs on words. Every grocery we buy, every call we make, every meeting we attend, is fueled by words upon words upon words. Communication is one outer gift we all perforce develop all our lives. It can be a wonderful spiritual practice as well as a shared outer gift to pledge the self to communicate ever more clearly. I wish us all good fortune with it. All right, and there you have it. As you can see, this topic of starseeds and wanderers' missions on Earth, the main mission and the secondary missions, the inner mission and the outer missions, the inner gifts and the outer gifts, lightening the self to lighten the planet and population, and direct service and passive service. Today we covered again the doing of being a passive radiator of love and light, seeing people at the soul level, being there for others, listening and communication. And on the part 2 of this, we'll start off with a brief review and then get right into where we left off so we can finish the topic of the secondary missions of all wanderers and starseeds, completing the series with discussions on healing, doing global work, channeling, and vocal channeling. See you on the next video. Take good care of yourself. Until next time.